Welcome, everybody, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a returning guest, Michael Johnson, managing partner of Get Found First and Spot On Solutions, entrepreneur, investor, father, husband, all of the above, all around pretty good guy. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Michael.
Awesome. Best and most important title of the last two, husband and father.
Yeah, there you go. No, that's a good answer. We'll make sure Cheyenne listens to that clip.
No, but it's great to be back, man. Yeah. It's lots gone on, lots happened, some stories to tell. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Yeah. We, if I remember right, we had you on back in March. So yes, it's been 6 months and a lot has happened since then. Probably the biggest thing that I wanted to kind of first and foremost get into and talk a little bit about is it's recently been announced, Get Found First, third year in a row on the Inc. 5000 list. So congrats to you and to everybody here. But maybe let's start by talking a little bit about that. What is the Inc. 5000 list? Yeah. Why is it important for a new business to be on that list? What's so cool about it?
Yeah, so Inc. 5000 is managed by Inc. Magazine.
Okay.
And they take applications, and functionally what they do is they look at a 3-year growth period.
Okay.
And they calculate your percentage growth. So functionally you take the, let's say they looked at 2021's numbers. They subtracted 2018's number, divided it by 2018's number, and that gives you your percentage growth.
Love it.
And out of all those applications, they pick the, based on that percentage, the 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in America. So it's a really difficult thing to stay on the list multiple years.
Yeah.
Because what it really is looking at is more like a 5 to 6 year growth period at that point. Right. Not just, hey, we were barely in business,
the first year,
we have a good business.
And then we quadrupled our business the second year. It's more to it than that.
Yeah. So I think our percentage growth, the first 3 year period, which was looking at 2016 to 2019, it was like 487% growth.
Wow.
And then, I think you get to the next one, it was like 250%.
Right.
And then this last year, I think it was like 187.
Yeah.
So it's still great growth. But again, like your first application is usually your one shot to try to, get as high on the list as you can.
That's really cool. Yeah. And it seems that, I'm fairly new to business world and entrepreneurship and everything like that. But I really love that. There's organizations like this out there that can recognize some of these really, really cool businesses.
Yeah, no, it's a really great thing. We got a lot of great PR. The first year Katie and I were actually featured in Inc. Magazine.
That's
cool.
They
had a featured story on us, which was really awesome. Kind of talking about the challenges of starting a company in rural Idaho.
Yeah.
And how we've been able to do it. But honestly, we got a letter from, I think it's like the president of Inc. Magazine.
Okay.
And he talks about how less than 1 in 5 of the people who apply at Inc. 5000 make it multiple times.
Wow.
So it's, you're talking already looking at like really high growth, well-run companies.
Yeah.
And less than 20% of them will make the list multiple times.
Yeah.
So it, like I said, just proves how hard it is to stay on the list, multiple years in a row. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we'd kind of discussed a little bit before jumping on the podcast that you don't want to say anybody can get on the list, but it definitely is a lot easier to get on than it is to stay multiple years.
Yeah. Your
back to back.
Well, in your first year, like I said, is usually your one shot to get as high on the, we were top 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the next year we were, I think we were sub 2,000, but then, this year I think we're like 4,400.
Right.
So it's really hard to get high up on the list when you've had your big growth year.
Yeah. Super, super cool. Do you find that list is a lot of startups that are VC backed startups?
Yeah, you end up with some of that. You end up with, I think it's pretty rare that you're going to find a company who's been in business for 20 years and suddenly makes the list.
Right. It's within their infancy, the first 4 or 5 years.
I think most of them are probably their first 5 years of business.
Gotcha.
You have to be in at 3.
Yeah.
because they're looking at 3-year growth phase.
Right.
So you had to have had some revenue for that company, in the first year. And a lot of other companies too make the list through acquisition
Yeah.
rather than through like organic growth.
Organic growth. Yeah.
So
They're getting purchased or bought out.
or they're buying out other companies and doing an M&A. You're going to see a lot of that type of thing going on.
So you mentioned that, you and Katie, kind of the two halves of this story, the managing partners. You guys were featured in the magazine and talked about some of the challenges that you face, like growing a company, especially a large multi-million-dollar company in rural Idaho.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you've seen, that you've faced as you tried to grow your business here in rural Idaho that maybe people in LA don't get,
Yeah. So, I think there's like just kind of course, there's your out of the box challenges that just come with where we're at, right? Hiring and recruiting is a challenge. Big one. Yeah. And, then that leads into training is a really important component because if you can't hire talent or steal talent, then you have to teach it.
Yep.
So I think that's a big component that we have to face that maybe some other agencies don't. The other thing we have to face too is, I think those clients in those big cities, they're more apt to get clients in those big cities.
Right.
So
it's an easier sell because they're around the corner from them.
Yeah. Or they have some name recognition, or you end up with some word of mouth, that type of thing. Our word of mouth is going to be smaller, Idaho-based companies, which is great. Yeah. We love those clients, but again, you're going to have a hard time getting really large brands.
Yeah.
Just around the corner from you.
Right.
Because you share some office space.
Yeah.
That, we don't have. I think the other thing too is, it's really important that we try to like be competitive with wages and benefits and things like that. And because of cost of living being lower here, I think there's other economic factors here that do make, there's pluses and minuses there.
Right.
Right. Of course, bigger clients means more revenue, means you pay people more. We have less clients, smaller clients, can't pay people as much.
Right.
So I think you deal with a little bit of that challenge.
Yeah, I've heard stories. You and Katie both individually have told me stories about, maybe going to do a pitch meeting or something where you're going in to meet with a client, and they're like, "Yeah, where are you guys based out of?" And they're like, Blackfoot, Idaho. They probably first are like Idaho, and then they're like,
"Where's that?"
Yeah, and then you're like, "Oh yeah, not only are we in Idaho, but we're in a population. There's 12,000 people in our hometown. Like it's just it's a very, very small rural community." But I think, I think what you mentioned there are pluses and minuses to that. We can train our people in-house exactly how we want them.
And they're more loyal. That's why we do business here. Loyal, integrity. Those things that matter to our agency. Culturally, we find those people here.
Yeah. It's a little bit easier to find those people here, in my opinion,
who match our culture, our values. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, that's interesting, and it speaks even more so to who you guys are and what you've been able to grow here, because you've been on the list, that Inc. 5000 list, 3 years in a row, building a company in such a small community. I would venture to say that the majority of those 5,000 companies are not in a small rural community.
No. Yeah. We've been top 5 in the state of Idaho, year after year after year. Because, it's just, that revenue's less.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. People don't have large clients. Yeah, totally. And I would assume top 5, your other constituents are in Boise, are in the largest metropolitan area in Idaho.
The only Inc. 5000 members in Eastern Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the only one.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah. Super, super fascinating. And it's a testament to who you guys are and what you've been able to build here. A trend that I've noticed, or maybe not a trend, but something that I've noticed with digital marketing agencies is that churn, and this isn't necessarily for just digital marketing agencies, but churn is a big deal for clients companies in a service-based industry, right? Like you're going to have clients come in and rotate out all the time. And I'm sure that's a factor when you're thinking about growing a company, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And what's hard with with the digital marketing as an industry in general is, clients come and go.
Yeah, big time.
Even our clients have been with us for a long time. There's acquisitions, or there's business dynamic changes, or there's goals that are adjusted, and all of, new people who come in that bring their own agencies or whatever. And I think like that's the type of stuff that keeps me up at night.
Right.
Because, it's, we have contracts or whatever, but nothing's guaranteed.
Nope.
And so you look at having the type of overhead we do, or, the types of challenges that we do. And retention and keeping our clients, making sure they're happy is, really a number one priority for us.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot easier, I think, to like retain and maintain than it is to acquire new business.
Totally. I'm going to ask you, because this is, my experience is much more limited compared to yours. You've been doing this longer than I have. But it seems like losing clients generally comes down to two things. And I think this is applicable whether you do digital marketing for a living or not. Our listeners do digital marketing for a living or not. If you are in a business where you have clients, they leave you generally for two things: performance and or communication.
Yeah.
And that's generally what I've seen. Is that something you've noticed as well?
Yeah, there's other smaller factors, like you end up with competition who goes and steals your business because of price.
Yeah.
Or you end up with thinking there's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think a better way to do it, that kind of comes back to performance. But really, like even price, it all comes down to value. I'm a big believer that, price only matters when value isn't present. I say that all the time, that people will pay whatever you expect them to pay.
If you communicate your value.
If you can bring enough value. It's not communicating. Communication's a big piece of it, but you still have to bring the value. You have to see value, right? Yeah. And perception creates reality. So that's where communication's important. But really what it comes down to is, are you bringing value for your worth? And I don't think that applies to everything, right? That implies, for every employee, for every person, every relationship that I look at, I think about, what kind of value am I bringing? And I think the more you frame it as, what value do I bring this relationship? What value do I bring this client? What value do I bring, to anything? Yep. I find that people are happier. I even end up happier if I'm thinking about, bringing someone more than I expect back from them.
100%, dude. I've I probably sound like a broken record for people that have continued to listen to the podcast, but we had Len Hume on and Annette Marchanda, and Len said something that has resonated with me so heavily since his episode, that if you want to build long-lasting relationships with people, you need to go into that relationship thinking, what can I do for that person? Not what are they going to do for me?
Exactly.
And that's how you build a relationship.
No, and I'm always thinking about that. It doesn't matter what type of relationship it is.
100%.
It applies to everything. Every relationship. And that's really what, networking, that's what, even families, if you're thinking about someone other than yourself, the relationship seems to work. Doesn't matter if it's a marriage, whatever. Yeah. The second you start thinking about yourself and what is that and exploiting another person for your own gain, the relationship breaks down.
Yeah.
Both people have to be thinking about value that they can bring to the other person. Totally.
Yeah. Bringing the value to a relationship. Yeah. It's the core of how you build relationships in any aspect of your life. Like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be business. It can be personal relationships with your, significant other or your kids or your parents or, whatever it might be. Like, go into that thinking, what can I do for this person? And if they reciprocate, the relationship's just going to be much more better. Much better and much more long lasting.
I've had a lot of experiences kind of seeing that. When I was, I think the old Boy Scout adage is, leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
Especially when you're on camp. But I obviously had an experience where it really resonated with me. It was actually kind of like an aha moment, maybe.
Yeah.
But I've got to be really good friends with a guy by the name of Jeff Mendez, and been very successful investor, entrepreneur, just think he's extremely intelligent, a lot to learn from him. And I got I got a chance about a year ago to spend some time with him, Lake Powell on a boat, and we've stayed in contact. We've done things together. But recently, Jeff's boat, he decided to Lake Powell on his houseboat on a trip, and his boat had broke down. And he invited my wife and I to come stay on his boat. And he's like, hey, is there any way you could bring your surf boat? And I'm like, yeah, totally. But I ended up getting really sick and super dehydrated. I couldn't go on the trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I ended up working it out to where one of Jeff's guys met me, and they took the boat for the week. And I think a lot of people would be like, man, you let some guy borrow, a $200,000 boat for a week.
Right.
And I'm like, well, first you'd have to know Jeff.
Yeah.
But second, I needed the boat back the following Sunday. So we took it down on a Saturday. About 8 days later, that Sunday, I needed the boat back. And there was a quick turnaround because they were done in Lake Powell on Saturday, and I had to meet him on Sunday. And what I'm getting to is when I picked up the boat, it was like in impeccable shape.
Yeah.
Like impeccable shape. And I met them in Evanston at I think 11 o'clock in the morning, And so they'd got done. And I find out from the guy who brought my boat back that Jeff had found a guy to detail my boat at 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
And have it ready to get back to me, full of gas, ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Totally taken care of. And I called Jeff and I was like, man, I did not expect that.
Not at all.
I asked you guys to get it to me on a Sunday before noon so I could have it for Monday. And I know you guys had it on Saturday. So I'm like, how did you turn the boat around? And he told me, he's like, first, we talked about leave it better than you found it. But then Jeff said to me, he's like, I always think about my relationships as how can I bring more value than somebody brings me? And with no expectation in return.
No.
And I've just always admired that. And, I've seen people like Jeff, and, I try, I'm not perfect at it, but I try to live by the same thing that you never have to worry about a relationship.
Yeah.
If somebody gets more value out of it than you take.
Big time. Yeah.
And so anyway, I think living your life that way, I would love to live my life in a way where I approach everything like that, where I just have no expectations from another person. It's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Because it's easy to take advantage of or whatever, but there's other people that I admire a lot that, embody that. And I think it's an awesome example, and it pays huge dividends with relationships and networks. And, Jeff's somebody who's built a network through kind of living his life that way.
Yeah, totally. It's hard to live that principle, but I think, you have more meaningful, longer lasting relationships when it's not, you're not keeping score, I think is another, a way to imagine it, right? That you're like, well, I did this for this person. Now they got to do something of equal value for me. You just can't live your life like that.
Yeah. Well, it's never fair.
No, it's never going to be fair.
Every relationship is always going to have somebody who, no relationship is in perfect equilibrium all the time.
No.
And the sooner you recognize that, I think the happier you are.
Yeah, the happier, the healthier, everything. Yeah.
And if you live your life based on that principle and then one of gratitude, then those two things, I think you just end up living a happier life.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome, man. And I think, you didn't go into the relationship with Jeff thinking, oh, Jeff's a potential client, so let me try and schmooze him as best. You know what I mean? You went into it like, oh, this is a friend of mine. We're going to hang out.
Friend of a friend. I'm going to get to know. I'm always looking to meet cool people, expand my network, get to know guys.
Yeah.
What I found is that sometimes the value comes in one person removed, right? It's that person knows somebody, and when the opportunity comes, I just hope they think of me.
Yeah. Relationship marketing is that way as well, right? I think a lot of people have a hard time getting out in their communities and doing stuff like volunteering or maybe donating money and supporting a local baseball team or something because they don't see an immediate ROI.
Yeah, and honestly, you can't view things donations and stuff in terms of ROI. But I think the other thing that's when I've learned about relationships is I learned this early on is you don't go asking somebody, when you need a job to hire you. right? You go to people who you admire or who have, where you'd go to ask for the job. You ask them if they know anyone else.
Right. Do you know somebody that's hiring?
Yeah, that type of stuff. And that's how you build a network, and that's how you get stuff done.
Cool, man. That's a really cool conversation about relationships. And I've had probably, a handful of episodes, maybe more than that, where we've talked about building relationships like that. And it seems like I learn something new every time about how to strengthen my own network, how to strengthen just like relationships, like with my spouse or, with my family or my friends or whatever.
Yeah.
It's hugely important. Okay. We talked a little bit about like, communicating your value to clients, trying to hold on to some of those clients. Churn is a big part of not just digital marketing agencies, but I think any service-based industry, you're going to have a hard time like holding on to good clients.
Yeah.
Get Found First recently had a pretty big challenge with that.
Yeah.
It's, I think, a testament to who Get Found First is. You guys are very resilient. That's why you've been on the Inc. 5000 list for 3 years in a row. Maybe talk a little bit about that specific challenge, and we don't have to go into super detail. But
I can definitely talk about it. So we, for the, ever since, roughly 2016, one of our largest clients have been just great. I mean, it's really a big factor in how we built the business. And there's a lot of stories that I could tell around that relationship. But frankly, like, I think by 2018, they represented 60% of our total revenue.
Yeah. It's a
which
huge
is
portion.
Super scary. Like, you can't tell you how many nights. I think about like what would happen if they left, and you think about all the people whose jobs rely on that contract, and I'd think about really once we got it, my attention immediately started to turn to like, first, like, how do we continue to deliver for these guys, but second of all, what does plan B look like?
Yeah.
Because you have to grow your company, you have to hire more people, you have to invest to service a contract like that, but nothing's guaranteed.
No, nothing. Yeah.
Nothing's guaranteed. And so I think for years I would stress, or you'd wake up with like a cold sweat thinking about, a nightmare related to
what happens if this
goes away.
If this goes away. Yeah.
And, but I think when I was on last, I talked a little bit about how, I've been reading about Stoicism.
Yeah. Yep. The Daily Stoic.
Yeah. And, I think earlier on, like prior to reading the Daily Stoic, I would actually read, some of the books from the Stoics, like Aristotle and a few others, and the theories and philosophies behind them. And I wouldn't like read the whole book, but I'd, pull out the nuggets and things. And to me, I think it was Seneca who said, like, really you can't control what other people do. You can only control how you react and like what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And when it comes to like stress and anxiety, I've struggled with stress and it wouldn't even, maybe anxiety my whole life. And as a worrier, what I started to realize that I did was I would make up scenarios in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think we all kind of go there, all at different levels. But I would literally like just start creating these scenarios that were never going to happen, but I would start thinking about them as if they had happened. And that's what triggers anxiety and fear. And as I started reading about Stoicism, I started to be able to come to the understanding that like you can't spend your time doing that. But what I started to try to do was channel that energy in towards, rather than like, how would I react in the sense of like emotionally, how would I react to this bad scenario, and instead change it towards what would I do that's in my control. And so what I'm getting at the end of all this is my wife and I and our kids, we were headed to Maui. We like to go to Hawaii almost every year if we can.
Yeah.
Take the girls and go to the spot. It's been a place where my wife's family's vacationed for years. And we had this trip to Hawaii planned in early April. And it's, we're getting ready to board the plane out of Salt Lake. And I get a phone call from this client. this big client that we've had for 6 years
Yeah.
stating that they were going to go a different direction and work with somebody else. And this was basically like 90 days notice.
Yeah.
And I think I was just like kind of quiet because I was so shocked. You know, I feel like I have an understanding now of kind of why that relationship changed and why they went a different direction and everything. But it's hard to, 6 years of working with somebody. It feels, it's been a huge part of it. I've had more time with that client than without that client
Right.
in the industry, know. And so anyway, I get the call. I kind of tell my wife, and she can kind of, I think, see what's on my face. But I had a 6-hour flight.
Yeah.
Without
cell phone service. Yeah.
Without being able to talk to anybody.
Just you and your thoughts.
Yeah. And I had a 4-year-old on my lap, but what I ended up thinking about was this, the Stoics. And it's like, okay, I can't control what they just decided to do. Like I can't change that.
Right.
They made a decision and that affected me.
Yep.
But the one thing I can control is how am I going to respond to this situation? And so I started to think about things in smaller chunks, right? And started thinking about, okay, how much revenue, at this point they represented about 25% of our company revenue. So still a big chunk.
Still a big chunk.
Not 60, but 25.
Yeah.
So I started to think about, okay, they gave us 90 days. I can count on that revenue for the next 90 days, but that gives me 3 months
to figure this out.
And so I just started kind of making mental notes, like, hey, how much, cost savings would we have by not servicing the contract anymore? Kind of like our labor costs and our hard cost. And, of those employees that are helping that account, frankly, how do we try to keep as many as we can?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to lay anybody off.
Yeah.
So I started to kind of look at, okay, what's the number that I have to get to replace? And instead of thinking things in annual terms or thinking about things, I just was like, hey, monthly recurring revenue, how much do we need to go get?
Right.
And then I just started making a list. And I had 2 weeks on vacation to start to think about, 10 days to think about how do I recapture this? And, how can I work with the team to get that done? So it's a list of, okay, who can we kind of upsell that we haven't?
Yeah.
Who can we, what kind of deals do we have in the pipeline that we can go close? And then how much is going to have to come from, prospecting where I'm out, cold outreach to try to make up the number.
Yeah.
And so I started really thinking about that. And then there are a lot of other moving parts, though, because we had to figure out how to continue servicing that project, but sunset it. I had to make sure that, the other thing we couldn't afford was to lose any more clients.
Right. So now you really got to focus on churn of all your other clients.
You got to really double down on the deliverables for our other clients. And then I've got to find a way to kind of clear my deck for 90 days so that I can sell.
Yeah. Focus on sales.
Because that's the number one priority of the company. I mean, Katie and Michael joke about it, but the number one responsibility for the CEO is just not run out of money, And
Right.
so trying to make a plan on how to do that. So what I did, I spent the next 10 days kind of writing down notes and putting it all out there and thinking about how can we go recapture that.
Yeah.
And it was it was a long list, but I just, they say, how do you eat an elephant? And it's, one bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just started, keeping track and every day, and it's all I thought about every day, and set a goal. And
well, and it's, just to interject slightly, you talk about it's 25% of the, the revenue, get found first revenue or whatever. That's a daunting number when you just think of it in one whole thing.
Yeah,
but
it was about $800,000.
Right. You got to come up with. But if you start breaking it down in chunks, well, I can save this much by doing this. And I can, if we close this client, that'll take up this much. It becomes much more manageable. It's the cliche term. Yeah. Eat an elephant, one bite at a time. But when you start breaking it down, it really does make sense.
And the one thing I couldn't afford to do was to like fret about what had happened.
Yeah.
Like you can't spend any of your energy at all with anger or frustration or stress about what has already, like, it's over.
Yeah.
You have to compartmentalize that, put it in a box and shove it away and free up all of your mental capacity towards your goal and objective.
Yep. 100%.
And like be laser focused. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah.
To figure that out.
Really cool, man. I mean, when July 1 hit, which was the end of that 90 days, you guys had almost fully replaced all of that money, right?
Yeah, we were really close. So it was kind of funny. So when on my like last day in Hawaii, I was walking around in Whalers Village, which is like just a little shopping area there in Maui. And there was a watch store, and always kind of had a thing for like really cool watches.
Yeah. And
I've always like wanted a Rolex.
Yeah.
Always wanted one. My wife knows that, like, and I walked in there and I started looking at watches and found one that I really, really loved, and was looking at it, and my wife's like, hey, you buy me jewelry. If you want that, you should get it. You work really hard, whatever. And I was just like, I can't buy that. Just lost our biggest client. I can't buy a Rolex. And I walked out of the store without it. And then I started to like think about it for a little bit. And a couple hours later, I was like, you know what? If I went and bought it and said, hey, I'm going to buy this with the anticipation of hitting my goal.
Yeah.
Of replacing the revenue from that client.
It's something you'll wear every day.
It's something I'll wear every day. And I'll remember the time that there was extreme adversity and I came through. Like I could count on myself to do it, and I can do hard things. And I kind of told my wife, like, hey, I think I'm going to do it, and here's why.
Yeah.
And she, my wife just being super supportive. It's just like, I was kind of surprised. She was like, yeah, then go do it. And so I went in and I bought the Rolex that I'd wanted and walked out with it. And I, every day that I wore it for those next 90 days, I was thinking about, okay, like I made myself a promise and a commitment that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. And I'm going to go replace this revenue from the company. And I'm going to, work with everybody I have to get us all pulling in that same direction. I couldn't do it without also getting the team to all, right. Like I said, we have to deliver for our existing clients. We can't afford to lose any more.
Nope.
Michael and I need to take on more responsibility. Katie, we got to focus on sales and just get down into it.
Right.
So I bought it and I hit my goal.
Yeah.
And still, like, I wear the watch, and every time I put it on, every time I look at it, I think about, it's empowering to think about how, when we do hard things, it changes us, and our capacity grows.
Yeah.
And so even though it's just a thing, or it's an expensive thing, it's something that for me has a lot of meaning because, hey, I did it.
Yeah, you did it. Well, and it harkens back to when we had you on the podcast the first time. You mentioned it then. He's like, you'll occasionally go out and make a purchase, or you'll do something in your life that will motivate you and remind you, hey, I've got to hit my goals so that I can go do this thing. Yeah.
The one thing that I have in my, it's my greatest superpower. My greatest weakness is like I have ADD really bad, like really bad. I take Adderall every day, and it's, I have a crazy ability to focus and like not be distracted. I'm gonna get like obsessive or something, but I also have the extreme challenge of like, that comes with how I focus that attention. Yeah. And I have to be really conscious and aware of it because, it can misdirected. Right. Doesn't do well.
But it really is, like you said, it's a superpower, and it might come with some weaknesses, but it really is like a superpower that it can help you focus in and know, okay, in order to accomplish my goal, I got to go get these things done.
Yeah. And you just become obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other lesson I kind of learned in the process is how absolutely critical it is to like set goals and make plans. And it's so easy to just get caught up in things that don't really move the needle. And I think, we hear about the 80-20 rule all the time, but I think the 80-20 rule applies most often to my life, that I'm going to get 80% of my output or what I can do with like 20% of my efforts, and everything else is kind of noise sometimes. So it's really, really important. And like, that's what I wish I could maintain, that is during that time period, I was using all of my efforts towards high value, high output things rather than, things that distract or, consume other portions.
It's awesome, man. You've hit on some really, really cool things. And that the whole story behind, losing that client and trying to replace that revenue and motivating yourself, hugely important, man. And it harkens back to the first podcast that we sat down and we talked about, what motivates you and what makes you who you are. But I think there's some really applicable tools there for people out there. Like, find what motivates you and go out and work hard and focus on what's important. And, I think losing clients, losing a chunk of business, regardless of what you do for work, is stressful, and it can be hard to face that reality. Yeah. But if you break it down into, okay, what are my goals? What are my plans to achieve those goals? You can figure it out. Anybody can do it.
Yeah. Well, and like for me, being an entrepreneur, a founder, business owner, it's extremely stressful. Like, unless you've been in it, I think it's really hard for people to understand. Like, yep. Like, I look around, I see all the people who rely on this job as like a paycheck. And I look at our, my own life and how reliant I am upon this being successful.
Yep.
And I think the one thing that process also taught me is, and I talked about it a little bit, but if you can take that stress and anxiety and channel it more into action rather than letting it consume you, I think you'll be amazed at what happens. And what for me was so important was seriously like setting a goal and measuring it every day, making a plan every day. And, it's easy to kind of get out of the habit of doing that, but you can't just like take a victory lap.
Yeah.
And I think that's what else, that I've tried to learn over the last 10 years is you just can't be satisfied. So for me, when I find myself getting complacent, when I find myself not feeling stretched, you should be comfortable feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, big time.
And if you are, right, you can channel that energy in towards, reaching and setting a goal. And you're in control of that destiny, like we talked about. You're in complete control of that.
It's awesome, Michael. Thank you. You gave me a lot of things that I really want to think about. And I think when presented with a challenge like you guys were presented with, you really have two choices. You can let it consume you and eat you alive, or you go out and you set some goals and figure out how to get it done. Yeah.
The only thing you control is how you react.
Yep. And I think at the end of the day, you guys really were able to accomplish your goals with flying colors, and we're still growing. Get Found First is still growing and hiring new people and bringing on more people to help you achieve your future goals.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. So Michael, thanks again for coming on for round 2 on the podcast.
Absolutely.
We will have you on again in the future, I'm sure, to talk about more about goals and whatever else might be thrown your way at Get Found First. But thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hayden.
Thanks, Michael.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe on any major podcast platform or check out our website at successonpoint.com.